Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Nancy.
I'm Nancy Reed. I'm your worship associate for today. And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We're a group of spiritual free thinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you're welcome here. This morning, our service will be led by Janean Shedd. She's a teacher at the Walden Project. And if you want to learn more about that, there's some nice brochures in the back afterwards. She'll tell us about that, I hope. And she's also a neighbor from Naples. She works with Petra Pageman at Fruition Seeds. Many of you know Petra. And we're so glad you're here today. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book. And whether it's your first visit or your 1,000th, we're glad that you came. There are a few announcements. Regular announcements are please wear a mask. Masks are available to anybody who forgot one. Child care today by Urine Overguard. Thank you, Urine. We are collecting cards for joys and sorrows after our first hymn. So you should have a little piece of paper in your hymnal or on your chair if you have a joy or sorrow to share today. A couple of other announcements. There will be a congregational meeting. It will be virtual only on Zoom following a shortened worship service on June 12th. Put that in your calendar. And we'll also be voting on whether to adopt the 8th principle to our Unitarian Universalist faith. So I hope you can join us. Are there any other announcements for the good of the church today?
Do you know what the 8th principle is? Is that about racism or something like that?
Yes, I can't quote it. It's in you should have it in an email, but we will make that available. Thank you for asking. We'll be sure everybody knows what they're voting on. As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your cell phones and other devices, not your children, and we enter a space of worship. Could I have some help lighting the chalice, please? We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
Morning.
Morning.
Thank you all for having me. As Nancy said, my name is Janean Shedd. I'm one of the instructors and the service learning coordinator for the Walden Project, New York. Don't want to give you too much now, just because I do want to talk about it more later. But I do want to just mention that as much as Walden is a secular program in a secular space, I was really excited to be invited to speak about it in a more spiritual context as well. Because for me, I find a lot of spirituality in those spaces. To settle us in this morning, I wanted to share a quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer. I think a lot of y'all are probably familiar with her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, among other essays and books that she's written. In one of her statements, she says, "The trees act not as individuals, but somehow as a collective. Exactly how they do this, we don't yet know, but what we see is the power of unity. What happens to one happens to all." And I'd like to set that as the tone for our gathering space this morning. I'd like to invite everybody to rise in body or spirit to join in singing number 347, Gather the Spirit.
Gather the
As you know, we are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. We welcome you to share your joys and sorrows by writing them down on the card you found on your chair and placing it in the basket when it comes by you, or by typing in the chat box in Zoom. Know that whatever is in your heart today, whether shared or not, we are with you.
I was invited to share a quick story with y'all at this point. And so I just wanted to get a quick either show of hands or a thermometer, yes or no. Is the story of stone soup one that people are familiar with? Stone soup? Okay. Quick synopsis for those that don't know or might have forgotten. There's a man who walks into town. He's hungry. He has nothing. He knocks on the first door and he asks if they have anything to share. They say, "We're sorry, but we only have enough for us." And he says, "That's okay." And he moves on. House by house, door by door, he finds nobody to offer him food. And so he goes to the village center where there's a communal pot where everybody used to gather and cook together. And he takes a simple stone out of his pocket. He puts it into the pot, fills it with water, and he waits. And one by one, the townspeople come up and they say, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm making stone soup." They say, "That sounds terrible. What is stone soup?" He says, "It's wonderful. It would taste a little better if we had some potatoes, but it's okay, I can wait." And one by one, they realize somebody has potatoes, somebody has carrots, somebody has other spices, somebody has an onion, somebody might have celery. And soon everybody is gathered waiting for this stone soup. And everybody is unintentionally been coerced into putting something in the pot and coming together into one family unit. And then when the soup is finally ready, everybody eats together and they remember how it is to be with one another. And they remember that sharing is everything. And at the end of the meal, the traveler takes his stone out of the pot and he moves on. And I'm sharing this because I work with high school students. The Walden Project has 13 students right now. And I asked them what story to share. And they said, "Please share soup stories." So very quickly, if you could just think about something that would go in soup that you would like to have in soup and just say that out loud, that would be wonderful. One thing you would like to have in soup.
Potato. Carrots.
Tomatoes.
Great. Okay. I heard nobody say vanilla extract, which is wonderful. So the thing about Walden is that we have communal lunch every day. And the story that they felt most important to share with you was that we make stone soup. And one day that involved somebody picking up a rock and washing it off and putting it in the pot. And another day that involved somebody dumping half a bottle of vanilla extract into the soup pot to see what would happen. I heard somebody say cabbage, and in my head, cabbage soup sounded great until somebody put noodles in it. And the noodles got purple and gelatinous with the cabbage because I put it in too soon. And I would just like to leave you with the fact that stone soup is best set when it is unexpected and unplanned, because the cabbage and noodles, not good. That is everybody's nightmare soup story. The vanilla extract soup was perhaps the best soup we have had all year.
And now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts support our work in this church. That work is summarized in our covenant, and the covenant says, "In service of the values that unite us, we will recognize the inherent value and dignity of each person, foster a community of compassion and caring for all, value our diverse opinions, and engage respectfully in all interactions." And 1/4 of our collection this month for the blooming season goes to the Finger Lakes Land Trust. an organization that protects forests, farmlands, gorges, and shorelines in the Finger Lakes by creating public nature reserves. You can give to this morning's offering by placing cash or a check in the basket, or if you're joining us from home, by visiting canandaigua.org/connections/donate, or mailing a check to the church at 3024 Cooley Road, 14424. We now gratefully accept the offering. Thank you. And sharing our joys and sorrows. I will drop a stone in for the joys and sorrows, and the ones that we have from the church today, a personal one from me. I feel very grateful for being able to be away out to the West Coast and come home safely and healthy and travel okay. I hope everybody can start to have a little bit more travel and connections in your lives now that we're getting through this, I hope. From Lynn Overgard, thank you very much, Lynn, because she says garden season is here and enjoy the benefits by picking up a load of lettuce on the way out on the back. And from Oren, yesterday I lost a tooth. Congratulations. Are there any others? Okay, and now if the kids would like to go, we will send you out to play.
Go now and peace, go now and peace. May God's love all surround you everywhere,
For our centering and meditation this morning, I wanted to share a poem that many of you are probably familiar with. My apologies if it's too soon, but I wanted to share Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, especially in light of the fact that that season is just about past, but it feels like a lot of what is happening in our world sounds a lot like the wild geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. want you to know that I chose the symbols that I did and the phrases and quotes that I did because everything ties into Walden, and we're at a point in the year when things are winding down. So Walden is a gap year and mostly a high school and gap year program that's located in Naples. We've just gotten taken under the umbrella of the Rochester Museum and Science Center. So we are located at the Coming Nature Center, not on the main part of the property. Across the road, there's an unassuming parking lot. And if you follow the trail up the hill, tucked away at the top, you'll find an old summer cabin with a pond carved out. And those are lovely spaces. And most of our school days are spent in the fire pit a few hundred feet into the woods. Walden is a space for anybody to go to. Our age range is usually 14 to 19 years old. And again, high school and gap year. And they spend the year with us up in the woods around a campfire. Anybody can come, doesn't matter if you've been public or private schooled, if you are out of school, if you're looking to get your GED. It's a whole cacophony of folks, but what we find is that it's a lot like stone soup. Everybody comes from all these other spaces, bringing with them something to offer to our community space. And one of the largest parts of our school is community. Because we're in the woods, we have to know how to work together. We have to know how to survive together emotionally as well as physically in the cold. So I'd love to give you just a brief outline for the week, because if you haven't heard of it and you haven't spent a day with us, you're probably not sure what that looks like. So here we go. Mondays, we're at FLCC here in Canandaigua. The mornings are emotionally impactful. The mornings we have community meeting. We take the time to share out anything that people have written or accomplished or found inspiring over the course of the week. Sometimes it's songs, sometimes it's artwork. We talk about what the week is going to look like, any changes in schedule, if anybody has sports events or music events or theatrical things going on. And then we talk about discussions. Discussions can take up to 2 hours by the end of the year, because who does the dishes is a really big deal. And who has to do them and whose dishes are whose responsibility. And also we talk about things like respect. One of the, for me, most humbling and impactful community meetings that we had was one where some of my female students felt like I was being treated differently than my co-teacher. So Walden was started by a man named Andrew Webster. He's the lead instructor for Walden, and he was the brains behind it. Walden is a reflection and a reaction to Henry David Thoreau's sojourn on Walden Pond and the book that he wrote there. And that is our core text. It's a very male-dominated text because it's written from a male perspective. And because Andy's the coordinator, a lot of times there's not as much equality seen in the beginning of a school year because they don't know me yet. And so to have a second teacher teaching in partnership is sometimes really hard for people that are coming from a one domination space. You have one teacher at one time that tells you what to do. And so to find a shared partnership can be challenging. And some of the female students felt like I was being treated differently than Andy was. And their comment to me was, how you let people treat you shows them how they can treat us. And so we had an hour-and-a-half-hour-long discussion about what respect looks like based on those contexts and guides. And that was sitting in a circle of 14 and 15-year-olds primarily, who took it really seriously and really sincerely, because we're a community and they care as much about us as the staff as we care about them, and they care about each other. And it was amazing to me to walk away from that space. And part of that care comes from the last part of our Monday mornings, which is life story. Every human being, starting with the oldest, going to the youngest, is given about an hour or so to tell their life story. And it's a chance for us to practice being vulnerable with one another. And it's a chance for us to share the pieces of our life that we celebrate and the pieces of our life that we celebrate having gotten through. And that is a really forming space for a lot of us. The afternoons, they work on research projects. They can research anything that they want to, as long as they do so in a way that is academically challenging and supportive. And so we had a student cut down an ash tree and make their own bow for it, hopefully to make arrows later. We had another student study different types of artwork, and she sat around the fire, and one of her mediums was charcoal, and she spent a whole day drawing with charcoal to work on her research project and to be mentally engaged. Other students have studied serial killers, and other students have studied wild edibles. Tuesday through Thursday is when you find us up the hill around the campfire. We haul up water. The students decide what goes in the soup pot for the day or the stir fry. And you, as an adult, step back and try to hope that there are no more noodle atrocities and try to prevent all of the vanilla going in the pot. But then they split wood and we sit around and we have philosophical conversations based on whatever passage that we've read. So sometimes, most of the time, it's out of Walden or Civil Disobedience by Thoreau. Sometimes we read from Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. At other times, we spend a whole unit looking at the watershed system, and we read a book about water by a woman named Alice Outwater. They all have a spot in the woods that's theirs, and a lot of their dirt time is spent in that spot, getting to know it, often going with a challenge. What's growing there? Do you belong there? Can you tell that you belong there? Who else lives in this spot? Lunch we share together, often talking about the news, and then the afternoons are workshops based around our 6 units for the year. So we do a unit on sense of place, one about sustainability and self-reliance. That one has a lot of deer hide tanning, basket making, cordage making. Our social justice unit has us looking deep into some of the structural racism issues that are happening, among other things. Our economics unit is when we make maple syrup and study what the worth of something is, whether economic, financially, or not. We look at the watershed and we chase it from the southern end of the Honeoye watershed in Briggs Gully all the way up into Rochester. And our last unit is our coming home, our communicating and looking outwards. And all this is done with 3 guiding questions that we feel like Thoreau was asking when he went to Walden. What is my relationship to myself? What's my relationship to my culture? And what's my relationship to the natural world? And if you look at those questions, they're all about relationship and community, the wider community, which means that around the fire, we can have conversations about abortion and have one student who is 14 and one student who is 21, and one can be pro-life and one can be pro-choice, and they can really get into it in a safe space. And a couple hours later, they can weed the garden together. It means we can have conversations about vaccines and about whether or not they should be mandated. We can have students that come from both ends of the spectrum that walk away in frustration at the end of the conversation, and that then come back and say that it is more meaningful for them to be in community with the other than for the other to feel like they're right. And these are conversations I can't have with some of my adult friends because we don't have spaces like that. So Walden is to create that space. And for me, I guess that's where the spiritual element comes in. And again, Walden is entirely secular. And I feel like the museum wants me to make that very clear. This is a secular space, but in a spiritual space like this, and in a space that's seeking connections, that's where I see a lot of tie-ins between Walden and the world in general. Because I think everybody at some level is seeking a connection with something greater than themselves, whether you name it as the source or the divine, the creator. If you give it a more specific name, like Yahweh, God, Allah, Mother Earth, however you name that which is greater than ourselves. And I think that spirituality aspect is what quietly weaves itself into all of our gathering spaces, whether in buildings like this or up on a hill out in the trees where Walden is. And I think the crux of all of that is the need to be grounded. We spend so much time being out and about and keeping our focus here on a screen, or keeping our eyes on the road as we go to the next thing and the next and the next. There are studies that show that 3 days out in the woods, out in the wilderness, doesn't have to be woods, it can be a desert, 3 days without any kind of technology, without any cell phone even in proximity, or at least if it's there, it's off. 3 days and your brain starts to reshape itself and starts to work more creatively, and you can come up with solutions that you didn't have before. Things also show us that if we are in proximity to other people who are working on things that they're passionate about, then that passion kind of bleeds into us. That hive mind mentality that we're seeing in a lot of really negative ways right now, with a lot of the current events. I'm thinking specifically about what happened in Buffalo last week, but there are a lot of spaces where hive mind is bringing people down, but hive mind can also bring people up. So we have students sitting around the circle who are all passionate about different things. And as they work on their projects and they discuss these things with one another, they start to teach each other how to grow. It's like throwing pebbles into a pond and watching the ripples go out. It's the idea of consilience. And to be in that space, you have to be open and you have to be grounded. And when I think of grounded, I think about feet on the forest floor, hands in the mud. For my kids as they catch frogs and they learn to identify the plants there. Grounded is in knowing one spot in the woods so intimately that they are able to recognize that that space knows them and welcomes their presence. Grounded as in being so firmly in their bodies that they can have hard conversations with non-like-minded folks and not only keep themselves emotionally safe, but see their conversation partner as a human worthy of respect and love the whole time and treat them accordingly. Grounded as in being so sure of their space and community that they can live full, authentic lives in proximity to one another without causing confrontational disturbances. I looked around the fire the other day and I saw 13 students. Some you could see were listening, and some appeared not to be listening at all. They were sewing and journaling, drawing, embroidering, carving spoons, burning out a plate, standing behind the benches, practicing martial arts motions, getting hot chocolate. And yet when somebody mentioned a sensitive topic or shared something that was deeply personal to them, everything stopped and everyone engaged in more active listening to show their love and support. And this is a constant flux in the space that they have created this year, our Walden community. And it's like this just about every year. I was there the first 2 years. I helped to establish the program during the height of the pandemic. There wasn't enough space to support a second full-time instructor, which is when I got to go play in the dirt at Petra's farm, Petra and Matthew, and learn at Fruition seeds and grow myself in that space. But being back again this year and seeing how that community works, the work that we're doing with our students and with each other feels even more important. Just yesterday, we finished a mural at Fruition. If you haven't been to Fruition Seeds in a while or ever, you should take a trip just to check out the murals. Fruition decided that they wanted to invest in artwork in a way of inspiring others from the outside. And so they did an all call for artists to paint murals on the wall. And where I already had, Walden has a relationship with them because of Fridays, the one day I didn't mention yet. Fridays, we do service learning. We start as a community and we go to all different spaces together. So we go to a hospice house, we go to Fruition Seeds, and we spend a day gardening there. Typically, we're up in the city with the Nielsen House, a halfway home for men coming out of incarceration. There's also a female counterpart, the Jennifer House, but Nielsen usually has space for more outdoor work for us right now. We start together so they can get out of their comfort zones, and then they split. And so every Friday throughout the year, our students are doing service in some form. Some are doing a lot of work with animals. There's a ferret rescue. There is a therapeutic horseback riding program where they can choose to work more with the people or more with the horses. We've had them at Wild Wings. We've had them at the Wildlife Rock Stars, which is a combo of them working with the animals there. And also the animals are therapeutic and they work with the participants who have brain injury who are in that space. Some are hands in the dirt working at farms and homesteads. Some are working more specifically with people in hospice centers or at the Nielsen or Jennifer House. People were up at House of Mercy in the soup kitchen there. They're everywhere. And then the last unit, we come back together. We do what we call land-based service because they want to be together and we want to spend time in one space. So in the fall, we started pipe dreaming about what we could do as a mural. Could we make a mural at Fruition in the spring? Our hope was fall originally, but it makes so much more sense to do it now. We had a workshopper named Ben come and work with us. He spent 2.5 hours with us as we explored different ways to connect with ourselves, our culture, the natural world, all trying to hone in eventually on one word to describe Walden. And at the end of the workshop, they were so up in arms about this one word and they couldn't agree on it that we had to wait. Because we're a consensus-based community. If anybody blocks it, we go back to the drawing table, we start over, or we try to share why it would be a good idea. We needed this word for the wall. So at community meeting the next day, we spent almost the entire meeting talking about the word and we didn't get there. And at the end of meeting, at the end of the day, we had to have a word. We had to have a concept for this mural if it was ever going to happen. We dropped everything. We said, think about what Walden means. One word, describe Walden. And we had students that said choice, space, freedom, community, connection. Said, okay, what is the theme? What are you hearing? And one quiet voice said, family. And they all quietly agreed. All right, hours of conversation and argumentation and family. Makes sense, I'm there. So this spring, we reminded them that this was the word they had chosen, and they said now more than ever, they feel like they've earned that word. So yesterday, the mural was finally finished. We had one student that wasn't able to be with us when we painted on Wednesday, but they were able to go yesterday. And there is a mural that encapsulates our entire year into one block of wall. Because family for them, and I think for a lot of us, means a lot of things. It's not just biological. It's chosen and cultivated, and it's formed through connections and communication and a lot of imperfections. It's formed by conflict, it's formed by strife. But at the end of the day, a family is a space that you know that you love and that loves you back. It's a space that you belong to. And I think ultimately that's what we're all seeking. We're seeking family style spaces where we know that we're home. And in light of everything that's happening in the world around us right now, one of the things that I'm holding on to, and I've got my fingers, and if I could cross my toes, I'd cross those too. And all the prayers sent up, is that everybody that comes to Walden and everybody that comes to spaces like this that are open, inviting communities where people gather to remind ourselves who we want to be, is if we can take whatever this feels like, whatever you name it, with us, that these communities can start to intersect. And if we've got enough of these intersections, enough stone soup going on, then we can all eat from the same communal pot, and we can all recognize again what it feels like to be in relationship with one another and to have a space that feels like home.
Ramblers in the wilderness, we can't find what we need. We get a little restless from the searching, get a little worn down in between. Like a bull chasing the matador, is the man left to his own schemes. Everybody needs someone beside him, shining like a lighthouse from the sea. Brother, let me be your shelter, never leave you all alone, and I can be the one you call when you're low. Brother, let me be your fortress when the night winds are driving on, be the one to light the way, bring you home. Face down in the desert now, there's a cage locked around my heart. I found a way to drop the keys where my failures were. Now my hands can't reach that far. And I ain't made for a rivalry, I could never take the world alone. I know that in my weakness I am strong, but it's your love that brings me home. And brother, let me be your shelter and never leave you all alone, and I can be the one you call when you're low. Brother, let me be your fortress when the night winds are driving on, and be the one to light the way, bring you home. And when you call and need me near, saying, where do you go? Brother, I'm right here. And on those days when the sky begins to fall, you're the blood of my blood, we can get through it all. Brother, let me be your shelter and never leave you all alone, and I can be the one you call when you're low. Brother, let me be your fortress when the night winds are driving on, and be the one to light the way, bring you home.
Before I share a closing quote, I guess, I just wanted to thank you all for inviting me to be here with you today. It's really hopeful, and to be in spaces like this where there's really tangible community and a tangible welcoming space. And I guess if you know anybody that is looking for this kind of a space and looking in more of a school format, please feel free to send them our way, or let us know if you're looking, and we can help you find another space for them. Because I know a lot of our teens are really struggling right now and need spaces. And yes, there is tuition for Walden, but there are also scholarships. So if you know anybody that is craving this space for whatever reason, this feels similar to a Walden community space right now. So whatever it is that you have here, if you know someone who needs more, that's a place to go. And again, just thanks for letting me come and share with y'all this morning. I wanted to leave y'all with a Thoreau quote because it felt incomplete to not do that. So in Walden, Thoreau writes the following: "Nature and human life are as various as our several constitutions. Who shall say what prospect life offers to another? Could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant?" Please rise and join us in our closing hymn, number 359, "When We Are Gathered."
When we are gathered for a time of worship and of song, let none forget the joys and griefs that mark each path of life, and thus we reach for those who long. We reach for those who long. For you shall pass, and time is wise, and countless seasons turn. So day by day our years increase, until at last by light release, our spirits shine like stars. Our spirits shine like stars.
I hope you will join me in our closing words as I extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I think we can unmute now if you'd like and have a coffee hour.
Unmuted.
Hi,
Hi, Jenny. How are you?
pretty good. How are you all?
Good.
Huh?
I enjoyed her.